Okay, guys, can we just
keep it quick?
do this? Yeah, for a refuah for Barry Bloch's mother-in-law. 1 second. Yeah, Esther. Where is she here? Okay, Esther Nachama Bat Zahava.
Amen.
And other Cholim of Klal Israel. Okay, so here we go. Okay, just stop me. Stop me when you stop me when you feel the time is up, because then we'll just go. Okay, there we go. Okay, so work on Friday. A person who works after Mincha time on Friday will not see blessings from that work. Most poskim maintain that it is actually forbidden. One may rely on the option that this refers to Mincha Katana, which is the first time you can say Mincha. The restriction is relaxed for the following: a brief job done in an off-handed, non-preoccupying manner, even for pay. A hired worker who has not specified otherwise is contractually bound to continue working until sundown, leaving himself only enough time to go home and perform the most basic of Shabbos preparations. And then that says there is an opinion that trade, that is non-physical labor, is permitted even after Mincha Katana if it is done in privacy. In any event, stores must, so the printers must close before candle lighting time. And then another restriction that's relaxed: a job required for Shabbos. Okay, sorry, that's cut off. Okay, let's and then just one quick one: Torah study on Friday. It's 2 points. One should take time out of one's Torah study to prepare for Shabbos, except, now 2 points, we're finished with this: a public share or the study of a fixed quota would be cancelled. Nevertheless, if the stores will be sold out, it is better to purchase Shabbos requirements and postpone these study sessions to later in the day. And last point: one has a servant and does not need to prepare, or one who has prepared everything on Thursday. Those are 2 exceptions. Okay. Let's continuing with the theme. Okay, so instruct. Okay, let's just see this. Okay, leniencies of Bein Hashmashot. So Bein Hashmashot. Okay, actually, let's just Bein Hashmashot is a period of time at the end of the day where it is unclear if it is halachically considered day or night. One may not perform any malacha, even if it is the Rabbanan of rabbinic origin. Even if if one is unsure, so that the prints didn't come out on some of the pages, it was cut off. Even if one is unsure, if Ben Hashmashot has arrived. For example, one may not. Okay, there are 5 things, yeah. You cannot tithe definite tevel. Now, I think we've heard that word before in the shira, tevel, Damon?
Yeah.
Unless one has nothing else to eat, then you can do it. You can tithe. You can tithe and definite tevel. It says tithe definite tevel. Then you cannot designate challah. In Eretz Yisrael or on Erev Pesach, even outside the land, one may designate challah if one has nothing else to eat. You cannot toivel your kelim in a mikveh unless you don't have anything to eat from. You can't light Shabbos candles. And the 5th thing is you can't form or designate an Erev Techum, which is the boundaries of an area where you can form an Erev. In the event of a mitzvah need, the Levush allows one to form an Erev, but the Olas Shabbos rules stringently against this. And just one more point here. One may not derive any benefit from a malacha done during Bein Hashmashot unless A, the malacha was done prior to Bein Hashmashot of Rabbeinu Tam, which commences 3¼ mil after sunset, which is a certain time frame, or the forbidden activity was setting up an Erev Techumim. Okay, let's There's other issues we can continue with next time.
Okay. So what was the question? Bryce's case of one who slaughters an ox, condemned to be stoned. Why does Rabbi Meir hold that the thief is liable to the fourfold or fivefold penalty? Because the oxen condemned to be stoned are forbidden for benefit, and thus it's not the animal of the original owner that he is slaughtering. As we said, guys, it means that it became already prohibited for benefit at the moment it was condemned by the court to stoning, and therefore there should be no liability for subsequently slaughtering the owner's animal, because the original owner can no longer get benefit for it. So why does Rabbi Meir say there's a 4 or 5-fold penalty? And Rava said, what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a case in which the owner of the ox had given it to a custodian. Step 1, owner of the ox gave it to a custodian. And the second step is it killed a person while in the house of the custodian. That's step 2, meaning it was in his custody. Step 3, and it was testified against and rendered a mu'at while in the house of the custodian. So in other words, given to a custodian, step 1, it killed a person in the house of the custodian while in his custody, step 2, and it was testified by the court and witnesses, etc., against it and rendered a mu'at while in the house of a custodian. You should know whether it's a mu'ad or not, it's actually irrelevant, because any animal, even a tam animal that kills a person, is condemned to stoning by the court. Okay? So, and its verdict sentencing it to death was reached while in the house of the custodian. Okay, so even sentence was passed under the custodian's curatorship. And the thief then stole it from the house of the custodian and slaughtered it. Those are the circumstances. And Rabbi Meir holds with Rav Yaakov and he holds with Rav Shimon. So what do we mean he holds with Rav Yaakov and with Rav Shimon? This will become familiar to you guys. We've learned this before. Rav Meir holds with Rav Yaakov, who says that even after the verdict sentencing the animal to death is reached, if the custodian returns it to the owner, it's deemed returned. So what we learned in the 45th daf is that there's a dispute regarding an ox that killed a person and was sentenced to death while in the care of a custodian. Obviously, the custodian is at fault because he failed to guard the animal properly. So the rabbis maintain that since the ox is now worthless, because it's been prohibited for any sort of benefit, the custodian must compensate the ox owner for the loss of the ox, meaning he needs to replace it with cash or another ox of the same value. Rav Yaakov, however, maintains that the custodian can simply return the live ox in its present state of worthlessness and be exempt from the payment. Or he can say to the owner, you gave me an ox and I'm returning to you your ox in one piece. Now, as to whether or not this is fair, the reality is he was paid to look after the ox, and if he returns it in that state, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's going to be a loss of value because I'm not sure how the original owner can derive any sort of benefit from it if it's condemned to death. I don't know if at that point when it transfers ownership that he has to get a document from the court and turn it into biltop, because how can they let a muad ox that killed a person live at all? So I'm not saying Rav Yaakov is wrong. He's obviously right, but I'd like to see how he deals with that particular issue. So in any event, what we're saying is here, Rabbi Meir holds by Rav Yaakov that the custodian can return the ox under the guise of, you gave me an ox to look after, here's your ox back. Okay. Then we say that he holds like Rabbi Shimon. So what does Rabbi Shimon say? He says that something that can cause a benefit of money is considered as money, as we learned in a Mishnah. Now, what Mishnah in 74b, we'll learn this, but we have touched on it before. Rabbi Shimon says if a thief steals from the owner and slaughters a consecrated animal for which he bears responsibility, he is liable to the fourfold or fivefold payment. Evidently, he maintains that something that can cause a benefit of money is considered as money. Because you remember the other rabbis say that if a thief steals from an owner and slaughters a consecrated animal for which he bears responsibility, he's not liable. On what basis? Well, I'll tell you now how it works, is that the law is that the twofold or fourfold or fivefold payments are not paid for hekdesh property, consecrated property. Why? Because you remember there was a pasuk that said his fellow, meaning that a thief is liable for the payments only when he steals an item that belongs to his fellow Jew. But when he steals an item that belongs to hekdesh, there's no responsibility as far as that's concerned. But Rabbi Shimon rules that if a person, on a separate note, vows to bring a sacrifice and then designated one of his animals, he didn't just say, I'm going to bring a sacrifice, but he said this particular animal is going to be used as a sacrifice. And if that animal dies, or it's lost, or it's stolen, or whatever the case may be, the owner is responsible to bring another animal as a sacrifice in its stead because he made a commitment. That's in the 8th daf of Megillah. So a thief who steals the animal is liable to pay the twofold and fourfold and fivefold payment to the original owner, even though he's stolen a sacrificial animal that belongs to Hekdesh. And I'm asking you guys why. It's pure logic.
You've got to replace it. The owner has to.
Exactly.
The owner has to. You have to replace it to the temple or whoever it is.
Exactly. Well done. So since the original owner is having a loss, and it's not just a case of him stealing it, the thief from Hekdesh, but now that the original owner has to replace it, the thief is liable then because he's got a share in it. He's got a share because we learn, according to Rabbi Shimon's logic, is exactly as Gavin said, is that although the consecrated animal is no longer the property of its owner, it's nonetheless something that causes him a monetary benefit, right, to get payment back. In other words, he benefits monetarily by not having to bring money or a different animal as his sacrifice and thereby suffer a loss. So as the Ferengi saying goes, Arthur, if you don't lose money, you make money. And obviously him not having to replace the sacrifice means that he's got a share in the outcome in terms of where he wants this thing to go, and therefore the thief has to compensate the original owner. So accordingly, if we combine the view of Rav Yaakov, that returning the forbidden ox intact to the owner exempts the custodian from liability, with the view that Rabbi Shimon says that something that can cause money is considered as money, the following emerges in the case of an animal that was killed and was condemned while in the custody of a custodian, and then was stolen from his house and slaughtered. So although the animal is forbidden for benefit when it is stolen and slaughtered, it's owned by the custodian, since it causes him money. In other words, it's going to cost him money, just like something that's stolen from Hekdesh, because he has to replace it. And so the only way he can free himself from liability is to bring that original owner, that original animal back to the owner, according to Rav Yaakov. Okay, so the thief who steals and slaughters the animal that he stole from the custodian is still technically owned by the custodian, because the custodian has to make good on it. So he must make the fourfold or fivefold payment to the custodian. And the Brisa refers to such a case, and Rabbi Meir rules that the thief is subject to the fourfold or fivefold payment because he holds both the view of Rav Yaakov and the view of Rabbi Shimon. Now, my question is as follows, is I can understand why the custodian is liable. I can also understand Rav Yaakov's position. Okay, so you give the animal back. But firstly, the original owner, I don't know how he's going to get to use it if it's condemned to death. But let's just say Rav Yaakov has his way around it, which I'm sure he does. The principle is the custodian now has been rewarded for him allowing his animal to kill somebody. This is the question that came to my mind. Why? Because while it was in his care, if he looked after it and it was stolen from his care, he only has to replace the animal if he has to replace the animal. So I don't understand what the muad factor is and the animal killing has anything to do with it, because the custodian still would have to replace the animal that he didn't look after. That's the bottom line. And in fact, it's a problem if the animal was sentenced to death, because then how does the original owner make benefit if it's returned to him? And then why should the reward for the custodian not looking after the animal because it killed a person be rewarded with a 4- or 5-fold payment from the thief? He's getting rewarded for it. What it should happen is it should go back to the original owner. And then basically the custodian is off the hook, technically. So I don't know what this issue is about making it eligible to the death penalty. I don't know what that has to do with anything. If anything, it complicates the issue, in my opinion.
Next time.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. All right. So the preceding Gemara on the 71st daf we on bet basically established that a Mishnah, which rules that a thief who slaughtered the stolen animal on Yom Kippur is liable to the 4-fold or 5-fold payment, was authored by Rabbi Meir, who maintains, guys, if you remember, that one can receive lashes and pay money for the same crime. It does not reflect the view of Rabbi Meir's colleagues, who maintain that one does not receive malchut and pay money for the same crime. Obviously, because the rabbis hold of Kimle b'di Rabbi Minei, and Rabbi Meir holds by, if you read the Mishnah in Makos 4a, that you can't, there's no such thing as Kimle b'di Rabbi Minei for lashes and a lower penalty like a financial penalty, because they're two different pasukim that in Makot in particular that the person is transgressing. So if there's two different crimes from two different pasuks, you do both simultaneously, except in the law of Kimle b'di Rabbi.
4:30 p.m. 4:30 p.m.
I'm done, sorted out, don't worry.
Okay.
I know the rules.
Okay, so the Gemara deals with the difficulty, as I am, with that this raises. Okay. Rav, sorry guys, I need my blood pressure.
It throws you off totally, Dave. You're like,
Listen, I've got it on aeroplane mode according to Rosh Yeshiva Kevin Mathor, and if it works, then I'll do it all the time. All right.
Okay. So Rav Kahana said, I repeated the preceding discussion in the presence of Rav Zavid of Nahadia. And I remarked, well, when he says I remarked, he obviously had a discussion with him, and he said, can you establish a Mishnah which holds a thief who slaughters a stolen animal on Yom Kippur liable to the 4-fold or 5-fold payment as being only in accordance with Rabbi Meir, but not in accordance with Rabbi Shimon? So what he was trying to say is, can you fit it in with Rabbi Shimon, which is obviously mentioned specifically in our Mishnah, because he holds that one does not receive malchut, lashes, and pay for the same crime. So the Gemara assumes that Rabbi Shimon's view to be that one does not receive malchut and pay for the same crime. We don't find any Tana who subjects the transgressor to both penalties other than Rabbi Meir. So he's asking the question, and is that correct? And why did the question come up? Because Rabbi Shimon exempts in the last two cases. In other words, in the case of the thief who slaughtered a treifa, or a non-consecrated animal in the temple courtyard, where the slaughter does not render the animal fit for consumption. So this implies that he agrees in all the other cases of the Mishnah, which means including the case of the thief who slaughters the stolen animal on Yom Kippur, that there's an eligibility for the 4- or 5-fold payment. That's where the question comes up. Guys, do you hear the question or not? If you don't, I can put it in. Can any of you give over the question? Okay. Do you want to take a try?
And I've gone blank. You'd have to repeat it and I can give it over. Sorry.
Okay, no
Maybe one of
problem.
the other guys. Yeah.
No problem. I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm
God,
going
I'm
to
tired.
actually, no problem. I'm going to share the Mishnah on my screen, and I'm going to let Arthur read it. No, Arthur can't. He hasn't got a laptop. I'm just teasing you, mate. Kevin, do you want to read it? The last bit with Rabbi Shimon. This, if one stolen an ox or a sheep, do you want to read from this position?
If one stole an ox or a sheep and then slaughtered it to use the meat for therapeutic purposes or as food for dogs, or if he slaughters it and it is found to be a treifa, or if he slaughters it as a non-consecrated animal in the temple courtyard, in all these cases he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment. Rav Shimon exempts him from the fourfold or fivefold payment in these last two cases.
Yes. So the question of the Gemara, guys, quite simply is, we know that Rabbi Meir seems to be the only opinion in the Gemara in Makot that holds of both a simultaneous payment of lashes as well as a financial payment. And that was for Edim Zomamim, and so too for slaughtering an animal in Yom Kippur. There are lashes for the crime of breaking Yom Kippur, and a fourfold or fivefold payment for slaughtering a stolen animal. They're two different pesukim. So we say that generally we know that the rabbis don't agree with Rabbi Meir. So we say, surely in this case, Rabbi Shimon does agree with Rabbi Meir, because it says Rabbi Shimon, Kevin just read this, exempts him from the fourfold or fivefold payment only in these last two cases. And what is the inference from that? Is that if it hasn't been that the animal's a treifa, or if he slaughters it in a non-consecrated animal in the temple courtyard, because those are not eligible to be eaten, they are not eligible for the four or fivefold payment. But it would seem that apart from those two cases, everything that the thief does when he slaughters the animal induces a four or fivefold payment, including slaughtering it on Yom Kippur. Because the only thing Rabbi Shimon did is exempt him in the last two cases. He didn't exempt him in the slaughter of Yom Kippur. So what is asked here is, could it be that Rabbi Shimon agrees with Rabbi Meir? That's the question put across simply. And I thought if I shared my screen, it makes the question easier to understand. Do you agree, guys, with these sharing of the screen and notes?
Yeah, no,
it's a lot easier to understand. So
you can read while you're talking, it helps.
Yeah, and it makes sense in terms of the concept. So that implies that he agrees in all the other cases of the Mishnah, that the thief is liable to the fourfold or fivefold payment. And Rav Zaved, who he asked, said to me in reply, no. This implies only that it agrees in the two preceding cases where the thief slaughtered or sold the animal for therapeutic purposes or for dogs. So what it's actually saying is as follows. Let me just basically, Rav Saved said, no, you can't come to that conclusion, that he's only exempting in the last two cases, and it implies that there is a fourfold or fivefold penalty with Yom Kippur, which would seem to slaughtering an animal, a stolen animal in Yom Kippur, which would just seem to agree with Rabbi Meir. He's saying Rabbi Shimon doesn't agree with Rabbi Meir. He states his position exactly the same as the rabbis. He exempts him only in those last two cases, not to teach that he holds the thief liable when he slaughters on Yom Kippur, guys, but rather to teach that he holds the thief liable when he slaughters for therapeutic purposes or for dogs. And it was necessary for the Mishnah to teach us this, because you could have thought that since Rabbi Shimon maintains that a slaughter which does not render the animal fit for human consumption is not deemed a slaughter with respect to the fourfold or fivefold payment, so to a slaughter for therapeutic purposes or for dogs is not deemed a slaughter, since it was not a slaughter for human consumption. Okay, so guys, are you understanding what I'm saying or not?
Yeah, but it's a little bit unfair to the original owner, because he might have used it for human consumption. So just because it's used for, I understand the treif, I get the treif, because it would have been a treifa It would have been a treifa for the original owner and for the thief. It would have made no difference. But yeah, in this particular case, the thief decides to use it for dog food or for therapeutic purposes, but the original owner would have used it for human consumption. So why should he lose out and not get that penalty? It's not fair to him. Just saying.
Okay, well, the answer being, and I don't want you to confuse the 2 points, is that the original owner still gets double the payment of what he was stolen. So he ends up sorted, believe me. It's like somebody stealing a Golf from you and you end up giving them a Mercedes back in value. Whether or not he gets a Porsche or not, he's happy he got a Mercedes. He got double what his car was worth. Still pretty good.
So he gets the 2, as long as he gets the 2. Okay, I forgot about that. Thank you. Next one then.
And also, the rule is that if it's not fit for human consumption, like it's a treifa, the reason specifically where is that it becomes null and void. Or if it's if a non-consecrated animal is slaughtered in the temple grounds, nobody can benefit from it. So why should
I understand.
Yeah, so you saying it's unfair because it's not in the original owner's hands, it's in the thief's hand, and why should he have that control taken away from him? But even if that's the case,
because in this particular case, that animal you can still derive benefit from. That the thief happened to choose not to derive benefit from it. But if it's a treifa, then neither party, the thief or the owner, couldn't have used it. That I understand for any benefit. That I understand, makes sense. But in this particular case, the original owner, in all probability, would have used it for human consumption. This guy went and used it for his own, for dog food and all that. It just seems a bit unfair. But
so then how do you answer the second? How do you answer the second question that the thief decided to slaughter the animal in temple, in consecrated area, which he wasn't allowed to do, and that rendered the animal non-fit for benefit of any Jew? That's not the original owner's fault either.
So then it's the same. That's right, and that's also the same sort of problem.
Yeah. So the bottom line is the original owner gets double. So we're not crying tears for him. Believe me. If I was getting paid double for what I'd lose, I'd leave my car outside every day.
Which I think you do anyway. All right.
I'm trying. The gearbox is going on it. I'm trying. Nobody wants to steal it. All right. So, guys, the bottom line is that Rabbi Shimon maintains that a slaughter which does not render the animal fit for human consumption is not deemed a slaughter with respect to the fourfold or fivefold payment. So you would have thought that any slaughter for therapeutic purposes or for dog is not deemed a real slaughter because it's not used for human consumption. And that's why the Mishnah states that Rabbi Shimon exempts the thief only in those 2 cases. And what 2 cases are those? Guys, what 2 cases are those before I share my screen?
It's the last 2 at the end there, where, memory. What was
Treifa?
it?
Yes.
And
well done.
what's the other one? No, but get the other one. Don't say well done yet. You get the second one then, Gavin.
No, I'm so tired. I'm trying.
Arthur?
I know it's the last 2. It was, Treifa and...
Guys, I've done 3 nights.
And to give for the dogs, to slaughter for the dogs.
I'm doing another night tonight. So
no, I'll share my screen. Just give me a second.
Share the screen.
But guys, I'm trying to cover a little bit of ground. You're not giving me too much of a chance. So just read, if he, exactly as Kevin said, if he slaughters it and it's found to be a treifa, and if he slaughters it as a non-consecrated animal in the temple courtyard.
Okay.
So what we're saying is, the reason why it mentions it in the Mishnah is to say that technically Rabbi Shimon, just because it's not used for human consumption, doesn't mean that the thief is off the hook for the fourfold or fivefold payment. Because if he slaughters it in a kosher manner, okay, the meat could be permitted for Jewish consumption, and therefore it's a slaughter that is fit. The fact that he decides to give the meat to his dogs or to use it for therapeutic purposes doesn't eliminate his fourfold or fivefold payment. Exactly, Gavin. So that should make you feel better. However, if I was the thief and I was using it for therapeutic purposes or dogs, I would slaughter it in a treif way so as not to be eligible for a fourfold or fivefold payment. I'm just saying. That's why this doesn't make sense. So with respect to slaughter on Yom Kippur, he does not dispute the Tanna Kamma's ruling of Rabbi Meir, and he exempts the thief from the fourfold or fivefold payment, since one cannot receive lashes and pay money for the same crime, according to the opinion of all of the rabbis except Rabbi Meir, because you only pay the penalty greater than it. Okay, let's go on. The Gemara cites the clause of the Mishnah that reads, if one stole an animal from his father and slaughtered or sold it, and his father died afterwards, he pays fourfold or fivefold. Do you remember that, guys, or not really?
Yeah, no, we do. I remember it. Sorry. Not
Okay.
Sure. I'm fine, I remember it.
But James, wasn't that the one where if his father afterwards it would be his anyway? Wasn't it the discussion we had last time?
Inheritance. Excellent. We did touch on that. So if you want to just read that first part off.
Let me just zoom in because I've got a very small screen. Okay, you're talking about. Okay, let me move your
look at my mouse.
Okay. So you got it there. Okay, so let me move it up a bit. Okay. Or if one stole an ox or sheep from his father and then slaughtered it or sold it, and his father died afterwards. Or if one stole an ox or sheep and slaughtered it.
That's exactly it. Have you got the TV on in the background?
Yeah.
For the guy, there's no issue. No, for the guy, I get it. There's no issue. No problem. I forgot you had it. No problem.
It's in Spanish. I don't say anyway.
No, sí, señor. Let me carry on with the share. All right. All right, guys, let's cover a bit of ground because we're not covering too much ground. Okie dokie. So what we're saying is, if one stole an animal from his father and slaughtered or sold it, and his father died afterwards, he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment. So the Gemara inquires, Rava said of Rav Nachman, if one stole an ox of two business partners that had a share each in the animal 50-50 and slaughtered it, and then admitted his liability to one of them, in other words, with respect to his particular share, but denied liability to the second partner, that is basically he admitted to one of the partners that he stole and slaughtered an animal in which that partner had a share. But when the other partner confronted him, he denied liability to him. He could have given a trumped-up charge that he was claiming that he bought the share of the animal from him, or by making some similar claim. But Rashi says that he's not eligible to pay the four or fivefold payment. Why? Because with a kanas, the rule is with any sort of penalty, if you admit to it in advance, you only have to pay the principal. So he liked the one business partner. He knew he was an honest guy. He hated the other one. So he said, listen, I stole your animal. I'll make good on it, etc. As far as your friend's concerned, or your partner in the animal, I don't know what he's talking about. Nothing happened. So when he was confronted by the partner, he denied the claim. So obviously at that point, he pays the principal to the partner he likes, and the one he doesn't wants to take him to court now. And what the original thief didn't realize is that the second partner that got stuffed out of his money basically had witnesses, which he didn't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just want to ask you, did the thief when he gave back the principal, did he give back the animal, the full animal to him, or did he give back money compensation? I'm trying to work with, it's owned by two, and you can't split the animal. You're only giving it to one. And if you pay the monetary compensation, do you only pay half then to that guy? That's what I'm trying to understand here.
So yeah, I suppose he could have said to the guy privately, listen, I like you. I've got a bad little habit. It's called kleptomania. There's no pulse. So since that's the case, I felt bad. I didn't want to stiff you. I sold the animal. I took your partner's share, and I used it. So I profited on his share 50% of the animal. Here's the cash. But I want you to make a statement that I want you to be able to acknowledge in writing or etc. that I've paid you your share for the stolen animal. That's all I want you to say. He says, I'm not stuffing my partner. He says, well, you'll get nothing. Then you can both sue me. Good luck. He says, all right, I'll sign. But then I'm not saying that you don't owe my partner. I'm saying that you paid me for my share. That's all I'm doing. I'm not going to stuff my partner. But I'm going to tell my partner what you've done. He said, that's fine. Just fill in the document, Gavin. That's what he says, right? So then the partner comes up to him and says, why did you stuff me? I said, what are you talking about? I bought a share in the animal. I gave you cash. He said, you're a liar. I said, no, I did. You just didn't give me a receipt. Where's my share of the animal? So then they end up in a scuffle. He says, take me to court. So he doesn't have to pay anything more than the principal to the original owner. So he's made a 50% profit on the animal in cash. And the first partner turned around and said, you paid me my share of the animal. But he didn't say to the second partner that you owe him or anything. But he never threw his partner under the bus either. He just wanted to be paid for his share because he was in a very precarious, invidious position. So what happened is that what the thief wasn't counting on is that the second partner actually had witnesses to the event. Because apart from being a kleptomaniac, a pathological liar, he was an raging alcoholic. So he wasn't aware that there were two witnesses there that saw him steal the animal in the dead of night. The two security guards, Sippo and Philemon. So they come to the court, and it is what it is. So in that particular case, that's where the Gemara's question arises. Because it said, what is the law? Do we say that the merciful one stated in his Torah, in Shmot, Exodus chapter 21, verse 37, basically that 5 cattle to imply, but not 5 half cattle. So what do we mean? So what we are saying is the law is if witnesses come late and testify that the thief had indeed stolen and slaughtered an ox that was owned by these two partners in the animal, does the thief then make a 5-fold payment to the second partner for the second partner's share in the animal? Not, because there's no penalty. Because he admitted to the first partner, then there's no plus. But because the second one he was denying it, because he didn't realize there were witnesses, the thief is certainly exempt from paying the 5-fold payment for the first partner's share, because if you admit to a fine, you're exempted from paying the fine, even if witnesses come and testify to the guilt afterwards, as ruled by Rav. So in other words, if witnesses come, he still doesn't have to pay the penalty to the first guy. Because the witnesses come, he said, listen, I admitted to him. He's even written a document that I paid him back. But he didn't count on the witnesses incriminating him for the second partner's share. And therefore, because he never admitted it and said, sue me in court, we want to know, can there be liability to pay only half the 4-fold or 5-fold payment for the second partner's share or not? Because we don't know in the verse in Shmot, if you pay the 4-fold or 5-fold, it says you pay, don't you remember, it says, guys, you pay 4-fold or 5-fold instead of the ox. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
Right. So therefore, it doesn't say you can pay 4 half oxen instead of the ox's share. It says you can just pay 4 or 5-fold in place of the animal. That's all it said, the sheep or the ox. So in this case, since an ox, he owes the 5 cattle in place of the ox. So we want to know, does the merciful one state in the Chumash, does it include even paying half cattle, 5 half cattle in place of an ox? Okay. In other words, does 5 cattle connote that the penalty is applicable only when there's liability to 5 whole cattle, or does the Torah merely mean to penalize the thief to pay 5 for 1? That's what we want to know. And therefore, he can be held liable for 5 half cattle for the second partner's half share of his animal. Okay, very straightforward so far. So the Gemara raises an objection to this ruling. He challenged Rav Nachman from our Mishnah, which states, if one stole an ox or sheep from his father and slaughtered or sold it, and afterwards his father died, he pays the 4-fold or 5-fold payment to his brothers, who jointly inherit the animal with him. Now here in this case, it's the same sort of analogy. Since the father died and he inherits a share of the animal, it's similar to where he stole the ox of 2 partners and went ahead and admitted to one of them. Yet the Mishnah says that he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment. So what it's saying is, evidently, if you're liable to the fourfold or fivefold payment, even when he will not pay 4 whole sheep or 5 whole oxen for the whole animal, but only 4 or 5 whole animals for half the animal. He does not pay the portion he is exempt from and remains liable to pay the penalty for the rest. Now, why does he not, Arthur, as you quite rightly say, in the case of a father, pay the rest of the, pay the full fivefold penalty?
Because technically it's his.
Well, technically,
once his father's gone,
he has a share. He has brothers.
Yeah. Okay.
So therefore, it's compared to this case, because he paid just like he only owes one of the partners. In this case, he only owes his brothers a share, just like he owes the second partner a share. So that's why the Mishnah is comparing both of them, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, perfect. So we can go on mute again. So it's saying now here in this case, since the father died and he inherits a share of the animal, it's similar to where he stole an ox of 2 partners and he went ahead and admitted to one of them, yet the Mishnah states that he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment. Okay. So the Gemara deflects the challenge. Rav Nachman said to him, what are we dealing with here in the Mishnah, where his father was still alive, sued him in court? In other words, the son was found guilty by the court. Then he became liable to make a payment of 5 whole oxen, because in this particular case, the brothers hadn't inherited anything yet. So he's eligible to pay his father the full amount because he's not a shareholder or an inheritor of the oxen. And therefore, the liability remains intact even when he subsequently inherits a portion of the obligation. Why? Because this would be analogous to a case in which the court declared him liable to pay the fourfold or fivefold payment to 2 partners, where a partner said to him, I forgive you of your obligation. But he's still liable then to pay the full amount. So if the partner forgives him of his amount, that's fine. But where the thief admitted to one of the partners before becoming liable to pay, and he's sued by the second partner, in which case the court would make him liable only for the second partner's share, it could still be that the court cannot impose a fine of half cattle or half sheep. Okay, that makes sense.